Okay, Mayor Rachel L. Smith, we are recording and the live stream is in progress, so please open the meeting when you feel appropriate.
Thank you, Ms. Riggs. So today is May 19th, 2021, and this is the City of Oregon City Commission regular meeting. It is about 7:05 p.m. and I would like to call this meeting to order. Ms. Riggs, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
Commissioner Adam Morrow.
Here.
Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Present.
And Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
Here. Right. So we're going to move past the flag salute and the virtual environment. And the first item on our agenda is in the ceremonies and proclamations is the Ruth McBride Powers Preservation Award and presentation. We have 2 awards and 2 speakers for these items. So the Historic Review Board nominates an individual or a group for the Ruth McBride Powers Preservation Award every year during Preservation Month to applaud the efforts of citizens, business owners, or others, or building owners, and others who show passion for preservation. This year, the Historic Review Board nominated 2 nonprofit groups to share the award. The first one is the Friends of the Ermatinger House for their efforts to provide virtual events and programs during COVID-19 related closures. And the second award is to the volunteers from the Clackamas County Historical Society for their work in maintaining the grounds of the Stevens Crawford Heritage House. So while we honor and recognize these, it would 2 awardees, it would be great if we were in person, but we're not. So this is our makeshift virtual award presentation. And so I would like to, I believe we have a couple of folks, at least one representing each one of the awardees, if they would like to accept your virtual award and say something to the commission and to the residents of Oregon City. So first we have Cheryl Rice from the Friends of the Ermatinger House. Cheryl, if you want to come off mute, I see you're on Zoom. You can.
There you go.
Perfect.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know if everybody had seen this award before, so I'll put it up. It's hard to see with the reflection, I think, but you can kind of see a few of the pictures. So we were very excited to have been actually nominated and to actually have received this award. So it was our pleasure. So I would just we had a meeting last night, and I would like to say on the behalf of the Friends of the Ermatinger House, I would like to thank the Historic Review Board for honoring the Friends with the Ruth McBride Powers Memorial Award. This award honors Mrs. Powers, who was instrumental in the preservation of the Ermatinger House. Again, I'd like to thank you on the behalf of the Friends, and I hope that you will all take the time to visit the house, view our programs that still are alive on Facebook, and attend events that are scheduled in the future. So I want to say thank you very much to the board, and we certainly will find a place to display this award. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. Ms. Riggs, I do not see Jenna Bargansky. Is she with us on Zoom or on telephone?
Orkowski.
Yeah, I do not see her on either.
Okay. Her last name must not be spelled the way Commissioner McGriff just said it. All right, so if she's not with us, obviously we're happy to accept the award on her behalf as if we were standing on a podium. And so we really do appreciate the work of the volunteers and the Clackamas County Historical Society and the work at the Stevens Crawford House. I'll open it at this time to any of the commissioners who would like to say any words. Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, I am. I think it is particularly significant that we have continued to do this award. I was fortunate enough to be able to work with Mrs. Powers during my short tenure with the City of Oregon City, and we should all be very thankful for much of the work that she has done, not only in Oregon City, which has been significant, but throughout the state. She has, during her time with us, she saved over 21 buildings throughout the state of Oregon that are culturally significant to our history. She specialized in pre-territorial homes. And again, I mean, prior to our becoming a state, and they're all pretty much still standing. I just think it is magnificent that during Preservation Month, we honor her, and that the city has been a true champion of preservation. And we are, again, one of the leaders in the state of Oregon in this regard. And I'm just very happy and very proud that we're able to continue to do this. I myself have been part of a group that received the award, and I've received the award as an individual, and it is one of my most treasured possessions. So thank you, City of Oregon City, and thank you, Historic Review Board, for all of your work and diligence. It's not easy, but we're glad you're there. Thank you, Mayor Law Smith.
All right, thank you, Commissioner McGriff. So Commissioner Smith.
I will just add to that by agreeing with Commissioner McGriff and the impact that Ruth Powers had on this city, and me personally in terms of the Ermatinger House and the other historic sites in this city. But I want to thank Cheryl specifically and all the other members of the Friends of the Ermatinger House. I am a friend of the Ermatinger House, as you know, but that group has had some ups and downs in the last 20 years with people coming and going and leaving and coming back and reformating. And I just want to thank so many of the people that have been involved in the Ermatinger House and the Friends group for so many years for not giving up. Because now we have an amazing Friends group that works coordinated with the city in a building that's been newly renovated and gorgeous and saved. And so it has taken a lot of patience and a lot of time. And it's amazing to think that we have achieved as much as we have. And I just want to thank the Friends of the Ermatinger House for sticking with me, and especially for Cheryl for taking a leadership role in kind of taking this group forward. So thank you so much, Cheryl, and everyone else that has helped on the Ermatinger House in the last 20 years.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Smith. And thank you again, Ms. Rice, for being with us tonight and speaking to us and accepting your award. We're really excited for you. And we're also excited for the Clackamas County Historical Society and the volunteers with the Stevens Crawford House. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. And we hope to see you at the Ermatinger House. Thank you.
All right, our next item is citizen comments, and Ms. Riggs, do we have anybody?
No, we do not have anyone registered for citizen comment tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So our next item, moving right along, is presentations, and the City Commission had asked for an update or periodic updates from Love One regarding the temporary shower trailer. So we have Ms. Brandy Johnson here this evening, and maybe some others, but I see Randy. So we can turn it over to you for the update.
Thank you, Mayor. I am actually at a laundry event, so I apologize for the background noise, but I'm happy to be here to report back. Our shower car operations have been going very smoothly at the Milner site. We've been averaging about 45 showers a month. We did submit a report that details the number of showers per month, but on average, it's about 45. So we're connecting with quite a few folks on a pretty consistent basis. We've been working with a couple other partner organizations to help folks get into transitional shelter and connected to other supports that they might need, whether that's mental health or medical care or anything in those buckets. And we've also been able to help provide some supplies to neighbors who live in the neighborhood, so residents in homes who have some additional needs, whether that's hygiene supplies or a meal or that sort of thing. So we've really had a great time connecting with the neighborhood itself and the folks who live there. And we've also had some people come by, people who've seen what we've been doing and just stop by to visit with us and thank us and make donations, that sort of thing. So the events have really been a really wonderful connection point, at least for our group, to get to know the Berkeley Hills neighborhood a little bit better and also execute the mission and vision of Love One, which is to provide those essential services. So to just kind of summarize, we have not received any concerns or complaints from any surrounding property owners or neighbors. We have, as I mentioned, had several neighboring residents come by to donate or volunteer their time. We've been doing outreach via social media, and we celebrated the launch of the cart. It just recently got wrapped, so it looks far more attractive than it did when it was just a big white Hulk previously. And obviously, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And we also, I believe, have Deputy DA Bill Stewart on the phone, who may have a couple of additional comments about some of the partnerships that we've been doing with the shower cart. So that's what I have.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Stewart, I see you on the Zoom. Do you have some additional comments for the presentation?
Yes, thanks very much. I guess I want to thank the commission and the city for allowing us to develop this pilot project. It's done what we hoped. It's served as a point of connection and a point to build trust, to bring essential resources, but more importantly, to get people off the street. Part of my role as the community prosecutor for Clackamas County is to try to address homelessness. This is one of the most effective tools we've found. And we hope to use this throughout the county and become a service node like it has at the Milner Vet Clinic. And we've been able to partner with a number of nonprofits to make that happen, and also bring in some other government agencies. But it's quite frankly far exceeded my expectations, and that in terms of the number of people who have gotten off the street. And that's what we want to continue to do, to try to address homelessness and limit the impact it can have on our communities. So that's all I have, unless you have any questions of me.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. I think that's really good to hear. And I remember reading some posts online, and oftentimes you see folks commenting about the homeless and say they should just get a job. Well, a lot of those folks cannot just get a job without having a shower and without having clean clothes. So the services that Love One is providing, I do really believe is helpful for this community and this population that needs some assistance just to get a leg up so that they can have a job and hold it down. And so I appreciate the services that you provide very, very much. Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, thank you. I just had one question for Mr. Stewart. So what I am hearing you say is that the fact that the shower cart is there enables you to provide them with additional resources or information where they can get out of homelessness. Is that what I mean you to say?
In essence, yes,
Okay.
Commissioner. And essentially, and I think Brandy would be more qualified than I to comment on that, but you first have to develop trust. I mean,
Right.
Too often we just expect people to walk up to red soils at the county and plug their way in, and chronically homeless people just can't do that. They build trust at the shower cart, and then people that they trust then help them connect. And so Brandy has housed a number, or she and her team housed a number of people because they're able to kind of connect and move forward. Without the shower cart,
Yeah, that's all I wanted you to say. It
I'm
wasn't
sorry.
clear, and I wanted the public to understand that the shower cart provides a catalyst for other services to help people help themselves get out of homelessness. So did I phrase that correctly? Okay, that's all I wanted, is to be on the record so that the public could hear that. I don't have any questions about those services. It's just, that's what I wanted to get the point across so that the public was clear. Make connections.
All right, thank you, Commissioner McGriff. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Yeah, I certainly have no issue with the shower services either, and all the efforts that are made on behalf of the homeless. But I heard Mr. Stewart use the phrase more than once, getting people off the street. Do we have any figures that show that our efforts have resulted in some number of people, 10, 20, 30, 50, that we literally have succeeded in getting them off the street.
Commissioner, with your permission, I'd ask Brandy to comment on that first.
Okay.
Sure. So with specifically our shower cart operations in Milwaukee, but we also serve folks in Oregon City. Sometimes people attend both events, but with a partnership with Greater Good Northwest, more than 40 people have been placed into transitional shelter. And some folks who are in a better position to be put into longer term housing have already been placed in the rapid rehousing program and are already moving into apartments, which we've been assisting with as well. So for Love One, that connection from between December and March would be 40 people. But I know there are other organizations making those referrals as well. That's just what Love One has been able to assist with.
Well, that is good information and hard numbers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. And I guess the last plug that I'll make is I think this is a perfect example of where the city could support a nonprofit organization that's clearly making a difference in the homeless community in Oregon City. When we're talking about how we're working on our homelessness goal for 21-23. So that's the last plug I'll make on that. The staff report, Mr. Conkle, looks like it's asking, even though it's in the presentation section, it looks like it's asking for an approval or a motion from the commission.
Yeah, I think we did this last. I don't know that I necessarily need a motion. It's with the commission, like an update, and we proposed a date consistent with how we've done this historically. If the commission's comfortable with that, with just a written update, we can provide a written update. Or if you want something similar to this again, we propose, a date certain so that we were all clear on when they would come back to give you an update.
Right. So the date certain for, I think, a presentation is in 6 months, which is, believe it or not, November. It's hard to believe, but 6 months is November. It's hard for my mind to grasp. And then I guess, other than that, though, I think we were getting a quarterly, maybe just a written. So does that sound right? Was that right, Brandy? That it was a quarterly written and.
We've been submitting our reports the week prior to when we report back. So I think if it's been 6 months, then it was 6 months ago that we reported.
Okay.
So we're happy to provide whatever.
What's the commission's pleasure? 6 months as the staff proposed in November?
I think that's reasonable, Mayor Lyle Smith. And again, I think it is important to, if the folks, Mr. Stewart and Ms. Johnson can come and talk with us. It's important for those watching on our channels to make that connection that there are people behind this. Getting a written report, the public's not going to read it, but if they see people, I think there's a better connection that way. So if they have the time and they're able to do that, I would certainly appreciate that.
I think I've seen general head nods. Yes, I'm seeing head nods for November. So I think we're good.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you,
Thank
Ms.
you.
And Mr. Stewart for coming tonight. I appreciate the presentation. It's very informative.
Thank you for having us.
All right. Good night. All right. So moving along is the adoption of the agenda, which along with that is the consideration of the consent agenda and whether or not anybody would like to pull anything from the consent agenda. Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, I'd like to move that we adopt the agenda and approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Is there any other discussion? Commissioner O'Donnell, you would like to pull something?
I don't want to pull something. I would like to ask something that I saw in there, just a general operational statement of Mr. John Lewis. When you get a bidder whose bid is significantly less than the other bids, either 50% of the other or 75% of the other bids, especially 50, is our process to verify that bidder is capable of performing the work that we're asking? And there's an item on here where the low bidder is 50 to 75% of the other two bids.
Mm-hmm.
Often we will. Sometimes we know those bidders. So we have confidence in those bidders, but when we're unfamiliar with them, we definitely review all bid. Well, this is true for all. We review all the low bids, and we check them for bid balanced, and we check them against our own estimates. Sometimes they're still below those estimates, and unless we've received some kind of validation that bidder has some problems, we really are kind of obligated to comply with the contract language, which unless we have other pre-qualification criteria, we're somewhat obligated to award that bid.
I understand. The item was 7C and I looked at the relative amounts. I'm not pulling the item. It was just an operational discussion. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a motion. I don't see any other hands. Do we have a second?
I will second the motion to
All right.
approve the consent agenda.
Ms. Riggs?
Yes. Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
and Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, so with that, we assume that the adoption of the agenda is in agreement with any other items. So we'll move on to our public hearings. We have 8A, and this is the two separate appeals for the Historic Review Board approval of conditions for the cottage homes in the Kanema National Register. Now, we have received additional new comment. However, the record is currently closed. So I guess my instructions are to open the public hearing first. And then we can discuss what we want to do with the record. So I'm going to open the public.
Wait. Isn't it the question, should we reopen the public hearing? Not necessarily that we are reopening it? Or did I misunderstand?
Public hearing. No, this is a public hearing and the hearing needs to be opened. Now, whether or not we open the record will be the next item that we discuss once the public hearing is officially open.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm opening the public hearing for item number 8A, which is AP 21-02 and AP 21. Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, I have a procedural question. Ms. Richter, did we not already make a decision on one of these particular files?
You made a tentative decision with respect to one of the AP files, but the city has not issued notice of decision yet because no final decision on the application has been made. We have one application, so we have one final decision, and that will take action on both appeals.
Okay, and just for clarification, it was AP 2103 that we made the tentative decision on?
Correct?
Okay, that was my question. I thought we were done with that and we weren't dealing with that anymore.
There has been a request to deal with it again.
Yeah, so let's talk about whether or not we have a decision to make on whether we want to reopen the record. And so does the commission need instruction or discussion from Ms. Richter about opening the record, or would you like to just decide? Do we need a motion on that, on what we're going to do, or just general? It looks like general consensus.
General consensus is fine. You've received a written request from Appellant Staggs, and I believe some additional public testimony from participants who participated at the last hearing wishing to make some additional comments. And so I think it's up to the commission to decide whether or not you want to take additional testimony. Taking additional testimony will mean not making a decision tonight. It will mean taking testimony from anybody who wishes to testify within whatever parameters you set for the additional testimony, and then returning and allowing anybody who didn't get a chance to testify and then making a decision at the next meeting. We'd need the applicant to extend the 120-day limit in order to accommodate this additional time. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Well, if we're asking for a motion, my motion would be that I move that we do not reopen the record for additional testimony, that we have made a
Second.
decision on one item, and there are 3 items remaining that we can deal with tonight based on the information we've already been presented. So that's my motion. Do not
Second.
reopen the testimony.
Been a motion and a second.
I second the motion.
Yes, I heard you. We have a motion and a second. I was told we didn't need to vote on it, but we have a motion and a second, so I guess we can vote.
Okay, I will call the roll. Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Right, so the motion was to keep the record closed. I need to turn it over to Ms. Richter regarding ex parte contacts, conflict of interest and bias, et cetera, et cetera. Ms. Richter.
Thank you. So just to be perfectly clear, for the record, the commission has rejected from the record the written testimony that was received today, and it will not be part of the record, and you will not include it as part of your deliberation. I will not read, since we're not taking public testimony, I don't have to read the long script about instructions about how to testify, but what I do need to do is ask any commissioners if they've had any further ex parte contacts, any conflict of interest or bias they wish to disclose. This would be anything that has happened since May 5th, the last hearing, any site visits that have happened that need to be on the record, so that the public has an opportunity to question you if appropriate. Thank you.
I'll go around the commissioners. Commissioner McGriff, your hand's still up, so I'll start with you.
Sorry.
Do you have anything to declare or disclose?
No, I do not have anything to declare. I've not had any ex parte contacts, nor have I visited the site. I have not spoken with anybody about this. I will say, however, that I thought reject was a little harsh, that maybe we will not accept the additional testimony, but no.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I have had no further contact. I have no, my statement parallels that of Commissioner McGriff. I have no
Okay.
conflicts.
All right, Commissioner Marl,
No.
Commissioner Smith,
Nothing to declare, and I have not visited the site since the last meeting.
and I would agree. I have same comments, no conflict of interest. I have had no contact. I have not visited the site at all either. All right, Ms. Richter, do you have anything else for us at this moment in time?
I just need to ask if anyone in the public wish to question any commissioner with respect to these disclosures. Seeing none, please move along. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Richter. So I think we have some comments from staff. Is that Ms. Turway or Ms. Reed, either one?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm just going to share my screen and give you a brief summary and a few added suggestions or options, I guess, from staff. Can you all hear me okay this time?
Yes.
Are these at the request of commission?
Yeah, it's an answer to, there were some questions that were raised at the last hearing, and so I'm attempting to answer those and provide some options that it sounds like might be helpful.
I don't recall that, but proceed.
Okay, Thank you. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to skip over some of this. The two appeals that we are looking at today include the appeal on retaining wall height, skylight locations, and window design and placement. The appeal 2103 was voted on last hearing, so I don't have anything more to add or to tell you about that. I want to summarize briefly the additional memo that was included in your agenda packet for this time that tried to provide a little bit more explanation for the commission, and that was that the decision criteria for this item is the guidelines for new construction and the city code chapter 1740 historic overlay. The information in the memo from myself and from Attorney Carrie Richter was clarified that the decision criteria is not the previous HRB decision or the previous HRB conditions of approval, and that the design guidelines, lay out general and overall guidance on the impact of the proposal on the historic district. And so we just wanted to clarify that for you. Regarding the retaining walls, I'm not going to go through everything again, but just to provide the summary that the design guideline for retaining walls, again, is to minimize the height and presence of walls. And that the HRB found that the height was minimized enough given the overall context of the site and the reduction in grading that resulted from the removal of house number 2 from the plans. And the additional, I'm happy to display these images if the commissioners have any questions or want to look at anything again, but I'm going to pass through them now. The suggested alternative conditions for the commission to consider are, in addition to the climbing plants to cover the wall that the Historic Review Board required, is to add a second retaining wall, either behind or in front of the existing wall, that would provide a terraced slope so that each wall, the existing 5-foot wall, and then whatever new wall is added, each wall would appear to be less than 3.5 feet in height. So you add a short wall in front of the taller wall and terrace it. The other suggestion that you could consider is to require the applicant to face the retaining wall with basalt veneer to match some of the other walls that are on site. It currently, as far the last time I saw it, it was more concrete and did not have any rockery or veneer on it. For skylights, again, the design guideline is to install the skylights on inconspicuous roof slopes and mount the skylights close to the roof plane. And the HRB found that the skylights met this design guideline. And I don't have any further kind of alternative conditions for you to consider on those, but I do have photos that we can reference if necessary. Regarding the windows, there were 3 issues identified in the appeal. That the windows don't have the appropriate shadow line, and that and sill plate, sorry, that the 3 window groups on house number 1 shown in the picture directly below the text are not compatible in the district, and that the side lights next to the doors on houses number 4 and 5 have not been accepted in the past. And we looked at this image last meeting to compare different window types with a historic wood window. The HRB condition of approval was to add window trim on the outside of the windows to provide a more depth and shadow line. And on the diagram there shows which facades are facing the street where the board required that additional trim. The suggestion I'll offer to you as an alternative condition or something that you could add in addition to the thicker trim is, sorry, that's the landscaping mitigation that the board talked about as well. But the potential additional condition that you might consider adding is that the addition of a stool or apron to the window trim might add an element that would kind of improve the compatibility of those windows, or make them resemble the historic windows more. So you can see the stool on the bottom, kind of, you might, some folks might call it a sill, but I think the technical term is stool, and then below it an apron. And that's found on a lot of historic wood windows. This hasn't been discussed in the past, but this photo is in the record already. And so I just want to point out that this detail on this window might be something that you could use as precedent. Window placement. The design guidelines talk about rhythm and balance, and the HRB found that this guideline was met. We saw this last time, recap of the window issues. So again, your options here are to, one, decide that the board's decision was correct and full and deny the appeal. Two, that the HRB's decision was partially correct. You would be denying the appeals, but approving the applications with modified conditions. Or three, overturn the HRB decision and approve the appeal. And in the interest of being brief, I'll end there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, are there any questions for Ms. Reed? Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Reed, you mentioned that some of the walls in the existing development have some sort of basalt finish. I don't know what that is. Obviously, I've not been there. I've not seen those. I generally like the recommended suggestion. However, my experience has been is that when people face walls, they put them in a pattern that is not historically consistent, and they look very modern. So I don't know what you mean by what that would look like if it was faced. So do you have any examples of what has been done currently? Are any of the walls there faced with anything?
I believe the one that is perpendicular to the street there, that's on the side of the driveway. I believe that one, if it's not already faced, it is proposed to be. I guess I would suggest if that's a condition that you would want to add, that maybe you can be specific about, using the size of stones that are large and would, be historically compatible, and not using the smaller, kind of narrower stones.
Would something, just as a question, would something like consistent with what already exists in Oregon City? We have many stone walls around our community that are historic, and that would have the correct dimension and the way that they are faced would be, in my, my suggestion would be that would be an example of exactly what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They're all over Oregon City.
Yeah, I think it would be as specific as possible is helpful. So maybe referencing a specific wall, maybe in Kenema, there's one along 4th Avenue, farther down. And then also, if you had a color in mind, or a tone. I know there are lots of, usually the basalt in these historic walls in Oregon City is dark gray stone, and I see in the modern walls that you mentioned a lot of kind of tannish color. And so I think that's probably what you're thinking about too when you think about compatibility.
Yes, and if I was sitting outside, I'd be looking at one. So Yes, thank you for helping with that. Consolidate that in my mind.
Okay, Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'm curious how a basalt veneer overcomes the issue of height. Is there some provision that basalt walls need not comply with height requirements? I'm lost here.
I think the way I would look at it, I guess, is that it would allow it to blend in to the surroundings and into the district a little bit better, and not be as visually, be as apparent visually, because it's not a plain concrete wall, that it, has that rockery look, more natural look, and it would blend in.
So this is a solution that the city's proposing, but it's not stated anywhere that specific types of walls can violate height requirements. It's just an attempt to propose a solution. Is that correct?
Well, I would point out that there is no maximum height requirement. The language that's used in the guideline is to minimize the height. So I think the board found that 5 feet was not so tall, that it would violate that guideline. That the guideline is met, and it can be even better met, I guess, with some landscaping to soften that wall. I think this is a really typical thing that the Historic Review Board has done over many years, is to, use landscaping and use natural materials to just minimize the appearance and make things blend in more.
I understand what you're saying. I just wasn't aware that the addition of some ivy on the top of a wall or changing its fascia, its veneer, with something else makes it an acceptable condition when the height is not an acceptable condition. So just commenting as we go. Thanks.
All right. If I may, I have one clarifying question on that height of the wall. Ms. Reed, though, I think the issue here, though, is that there is not a set height that it has to be built at in the design requirements. So initially it was proposed at 3.5 feet, but technically by the design guidelines, they could have said 5 feet, or they could have said 4 feet. 5 feet was built because of changing of the landscape, trying to reduce the grading. And so therefore, technically it sounds like the height issue is compatible with the design guidelines, and the conditions of approval that HRB added, or ones we're considering, is just to try to make it outward appearance be more blending with the historic district. Is that correct?
Yes, that sounds accurate to me.
Okay. Just want to make sure I got it all. Okay. Commissioner Smith.
On the same topic, staff gave us 2 possibilities for the minimizing of the wall, either adding a wall in front or behind to terrace it, or face the facade with basalt. I propose another option, which is both.
Okay, Commissioner McGriff.
Yeah, that darn Commissioner O'Donnell raised a question in my mind that I thought I was set on the wall, and then he threw a monkey wrench in the whole thing. So I want to go back to clarifying what Commissioner Lyle Smith said, and trying to get an answer to what I thought Commissioner O'Donnell was asking. So my understanding is based on the staff report and back in 2017 that the wall was not to be any higher than 3.5 feet. So the bizarre question I'm going to ask is, one of the options was not considered by the HRB, since the wall was built without explicit approval. Isn't one of the options that you take the wall back down to 3.5 feet, or is that not an option?
My understanding,
I'm not an engineer, so I don't know if that means what the wall's holding up is gonna fall down. I was looking at the profile when you showed that, and I thought this could have been so easily resolved if the plan had matched up with what the HRB had said. So that I muddier.
the walls were going to be terraced. So there was going to be a 3.5-foot wall and then another wall behind it, as I understand it. And that's because there was going to be this house too. And so there would have been more grading. And so there would have been more levels of terracing. Because there was less grading and the ground level came more towards the street, there's only one retaining wall. So I don't think, I think the elevation was always going to be there. It was just going to be broken up between multiple walls.
Okay. So that.
And I'm also.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, on page 52 of the guidelines, there's a picture of a stone wall. If that is helpful to look at, and in talking about materials, it talks about good examples are those that were typical of the historic period or that offer a similar appearance, use of stone, concrete, wood, and metal in finishes and textures similar to that of a historic period is most appropriate. And there's a picture of a wall. Yeah, so I don't know what you have in mind or not, but it's a picture.
I will get it because it's in the cabinet just off the screen a little bit. So I will look at that and then get back to you. So yeah, so the question, you answered the question. So again, because there was a change and there was a removal of one of the dwelling units, it seems to me that the request should have been before construction that be taken care of. That to me, that's the sequence of events and process. So you make a change to the plan, you get the approval, then you build it. So that's a little bit of a sticking point to me, but I'm going to get my documents so I can look at it and get back to you. Thank you.
I just wanted to clarify one thing related to that past condition of approval, which is that the job of the commission is to review the proposal before you in accordance with the design guidelines. So back a few years ago, the proposal that they reviewed there, they had put that condition of for 3.5 feet. There is no requirement in the guidelines for 3.5 feet, as we discussed. And so you don't have to worry about that. The question is, does the 5 feet meet the design guidelines? So we would direct the commission to think about what the design guidelines are and then what the proposal is before you, and sort of shift away from that past condition of approval, because applicants are allowed to modify their proposals as they have proposed this.
In my understanding, they're allowed to come back after something is built and request approval as well. That the staff report said that that while the procedure, I think the preferred procedure is that they request for approval. My interpretation of the staff report was that the applicant or the builder developer could come after the fact, after something was built, and address conditions of approval. Am I interpreting the staff report or that additional memo correctly?
You're correct. There is no penalty for when you ask for the question, because the question before the commission is always, does the proposal before you meet the design guidelines?
It's a little tough for somebody to comment on something after it's already been done. So Ms. Richter, the picture on page 52 of the design guidelines, that is definitely not what I'm talking about. That is not in a traditional configuration. That is very modern looking. That is mimicking something that's trying to look historic, but that is not it.
Okay.
So I would like to say, for the record, I was the lone no vote at our last hearing on this regarding the siding, and that was because I felt like the siding issue met the current design criteria, which is what our job is today, not to enforce penalties, not to be upset because he came in after the fact, and not to be grading against the HRB decisions. And I feel like truthfully feel like our decision making and our process and the criteria we used at our last meeting was incorrect. And I'm going to stand by that. And I would ask the commission to reconsider that, given the explanation that was provided tonight. So when we're making these decisions tonight, we need to be really clear about what our role is and what we're supposed to be using as a decision criteria. I feel like staff went above and beyond to try to make that extra clear this time, because I'm not sure we hit the mark at our last meeting, just to be frank. Commissioner Morrow.
Thank you, Mayor. I would just echo those sentiments. I was on the other side of the vote, and I was under the impression that the design guidelines were around the same hierarchy as the conditions of approval. And so I appreciate that clarification, Ms. Reed, and I will be making my decision in accordance with that.
Commissioner McGriff, do you have a new hand, or is that an old hand that's up?
Well, it is a new hand, but not an old hand.
Okay.
I just want to say that since you made that statement, I was getting a little bit nervous that we were opening a record. I am not interested in penalizing anybody. I am interested in us following our process. We have a historic review board that made a decision, and I feel very strongly about being able to support them based on their findings and criteria. And that is what I'm going to be making my decision about.
All right, so does anybody have a motion on the appeal before us, which is, if I can get it right, AP 21-02 regarding Skylights, the retaining wall, and the windows? I believe I have those three correct.
Could we take those separately and then come to a conclusion of a motion?
Sure.
Yeah.
Think of how you want to do that. So let's sure. So this is all discussion in order to form a final motion, right? Commissioner O'Donnell.
No, Mayor, I think it's wise to deal with each of the three issues separately. I think it would lead to a more clear decision.
Would it be helpful to put the slide up with the three issues? Or are you all comfortable just having them without any picture or language up?
Staff was really clear and thorough on what the three items are, I think, unless somebody else wants them up. That was very helpful. Thank you.
I don't need them.
All right, so it looks like we're good. So I'll just pick out of the hat. Let's start with Skylights.
If it's okay, I'd like to start with the wall, since that was my last set of questions.
Sure, let's start with the wall.
I would like to concur with the staff recommendation. I agree with Commissioner O'Donnell that I don't think plantings are going to totally get the job done, and maybe Commissioner Smith's suggestion of both. But then again, this person sells them, they go off somewhere. I don't feel like there's any guarantee that those plantings are going to stay there forever and be maintained. So I would like to see the wall faced with a gray basalt similar to and mimic the historic walls that we have in Oregon City, not just in Kenema. There are many that could be used as an example, and I would like to make sure that the example that's going to be used be signed off by staff so that we have no misunderstanding about what we are talking about. So that's my comment about the wall, and I would concur with.
So I have a question on that. Back to Ms. Reed. I believe in your presentation, you said that there was already an existing another wall that was part of this development that has not quite been completed yet, if I'm understanding that right. And so, and that the developer is supposed to be applying a face to that wall as well. Is that true? And are there guidelines for that wall? Are we telling, are essentially with that, with what Commissioner McGriff proposes, are we telling the developer to do 2 different wall types with her proposal?
Yeah, you're right. There is another wall and it is required to be faced. I believe I'm going to pull up the decision to get the exact language. Sometimes, you know, it's tricky to write really good, clear, specific conditions of approval. And so I think that the condition from the HRB did not get that specific about what type of basalt. Let's see. It says the applicant shall minimize the retaining wall height and use rock, brick, or concrete with finishing, or mortared or stacked true masonry or stone that was traditionally quarried in the area. So that I don't think that they specifically required a basalt veneer. It was concrete with finishing, rock, but then they were specific about if true stone or masonry was used, that it be stone traditionally quarried in the area.
I guess I just want to be cognizant of.
That's the entire Oregon City is our area. It was salted everywhere.
Right. So I think from my perspective, I think the development would look best if there was consistency between the walls and the facing. And so that's why I want to make sure that what we say isn't going to conflict with another wall that's already in that development where there's been direction given and approval has been provided for the facing of that wall. So that's my only concern.
She said it wasn't done. So
I'm not sure. I don't know if it's been done at this point because it's been a few weeks since I visited the site myself.
So I guess since I see no hands raised, I would propose, I'm fine with proposing a facing, but I would like for it to match what the HRB has already approved for the other wall for consistency. That's just in general. It sounds like HRB didn't have any issues, or they've applied a setting that they feel is appropriate for the other wall. I'm not sure why we would make this one different.
the only reason I said that, Mayor Lyle-Smith, is if the other wall isn't done, they can be consistent based on this. So if it's not done, then there's nothing to match. They could match easily with what the condition might be.
So Ms. Richter, do you have any guidance here as far as the record and what's already in the record versus are we adding new information or?
No, well, what I would propose, we're gonna have to draft these conditions and bring them back for adoption on the 7th. And so what I would propose is that Kelly and I put our heads together without adding evidence to the record that provide some language that I think will be, I think we understand what Commissioner McGriff is wanting. And I'd like myself to go back and look at the 2017 approval and make sure doesn't say anything about wall texture there too. And I mean, Ms. Reed may know, but I'd like to go back and confirm that, just so we're not getting ourselves sideways again.
All right, so I don't see any other hands, so I'm going to assume we're in general consensus on walls, and can we move on to skylights or windows? Anybody have a preference?
I'll take windows for 100.
Okay.
I think that the staff recommend, I'm not thrilled with the windows, but I think the solution being proposed by the staff is probably the most reasonable one. And as you recall, at the last hearing, I was sitting outside in my front porch, and the traditional window style was sitting right behind me, which was very similar and almost identical to the slide. So I would concur with staff's recommendation to add the apron and the sill as they've recommended. I think that would go a long way to giving dimension to the windows. It would make them look more compatible with the surrounding area, and also I think appearance wise, it would be more architecturally consistent with what the design guidelines and the standards in Chapter 1740 specify.
Anybody have any comments on that? Commissioner O'Donnell?
I guess all I would say is when it was built houses, if the siding is going to be removed, the windows are attached to the single wall that exists underneath the siding. So the windows could be changed out. I'll leave it to and they could put the appropriate window in there that would give them the 2.5 to 3 inches setback that they seek. I think I'm going to defer to others in many ways, but I think it's difficult to achieve that shadow look by slabbing on a 2.5 inch surround. But again, I'm going to defer to others who are more historically sensitive than myself. Thanks.
I think you're pretty historically sensitive.
Yeah.
So our staff proposing, HRB had already proposed adding what Commissioner O'Donnell said, I think an additional trim in order to add depth. And you're saying in addition to that trim to add a stoop, which I presume is the horizontal piece, maybe. I'm not sure what the apron is. Is that an additional, what's the additional piece? Is that below?
Yeah.
The piece.
The stool was the horizontal piece that sticks out, and then the apron is the piece underneath that.
So,
O'Donnell?
So my question is, how do you accomplish the shadow feature on the left and right side and the top? What do you propose that be added to accomplish that 2.5 to 3 inch setback?
I think what we're recommending is the HRB condition to add the thicker trim around the entire window would remain. That would still be a requirement, and the commission could add that the stool and apron be included as well on the bottom side of the windows.
Well, I'm not the artist here. I think it's difficult to add a 2 inch slab of material, 2.5 inch, and make it look good, but I'm not here to judge appearance. Thanks.
Commissioner McGriff?
Yeah, Ms. Reed, may I ask you a question? So in order to get what the Historic Review Board is talking about, I guess I'm in my mind, architecturally, it seems like you'd have to take off that existing trim to make it more dimensional.
I think you might be able to, sorry, go ahead.
I think what Commissioner O'Donnell's saying, that he sees it as being something that's kind of just added on. It would kind of look not architecturally compatible. So I think what you were trying to get at, and what the Historic Review Board was probably trying to get at, is to make it as dimensionally correct as possible. And to me, in order to do that, to make it look right and not like it's been stapled on, that outer trim is probably going to have the existing trim, and maybe you can put the slide back up. Seems to me you're going to have to take that off.
I think if you want to require that the new trim be
no, I'm asking questions. So if you need to show not that window, but the existing window, the way the one that you showed that shows what it looks like currently?
Katie, would you like me to do that or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Let's see.
I'm wishing I had John McLaughlin right here, right now, because he would be able to answer that question. Not the dead one, the current living John McLaughlin.
Okay. Can you all see that window?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I think the way that the condition is written from the HRB, that trim could be completely taken off and a thicker trim replace it. I think the way it's written, since it's not specific, you could just add additional boards around that to increase the thickness, and then caulk it up and seal it up, and paint it and increase the depth that way. So if you wanted to be one of those two things and not the other, then I guess I would suggest to make your conditions specific.
I guess part of my concern is that I would want you to see that before it's caulked and painted up and all of that, to see if that truly meets what it is that the Historic Review Board is asking for. I don't want the applicant nor ourselves, and I say ourselves, the city, to be put into a position where it's done and then, nope, that's not what we mean. So I'm trying to strike a balance here, to try to understand how that could happen. I know I've got a book of millwork pieces that, to make window trim. So I know what those pieces look like. And I don't know, I'm trying to get at Commissioner O'Donnell's saying, I don't know if just adding 2 or 3 more pieces of trim or a thicker trim is going to really get at what I'm perceiving the Historic Review Board wanted. And I know, again, traditional windows all have a as you call it, a stoop or an apron on them. That's just the way they look. So maybe I'm having a conundrum here.
Ms. Richter?
What if the conditions specified that staff reviewed or did a site visit after one window was done?
I wouldn't suggest the whole window. I suggest maybe a part of it, like maybe one side of it, so that it could be looked at.
Or the trim attached, but the finishing caulk and paint not done, or something like that. I mean, you're going to have to see. I would expect you'd have to see all the trim attached in order to see. I mean, I think to me, what's going to be important is whether it's square.
Exactly.
The lines are going to be square. That to me is what's going to be visually significant. And I think that we have a picture. I think Ms. Reed has a picture of what the molding looks like that has been attached on a different window, which I don't know if that would be helpful to see again or not.
Yes, it would be. Yes.
Can you bring that up, Kelly?
Yes.
And explain
That one?
why that one's not, that one, the window is wrong. It's not a good comparator.
Yes, this window is a single hung window that has more of a depth to it on the lower sash area. And the windows on the Kanema cottages are casement windows, and so there's no depth here between the two upper sash and the lower sash.
I thought we had a picture in the record of a house in a building in the Cove where the trim had been added.
I can pull that up. I personally don't think that it shows. It's very explanatory, but I can.
Is this a new construction window?
Okay.
I don't know. I think
it's
so.
It's a nice example. I mean, it's a nice example. I wish the windows had that quality. Again, knowing what I know about Kenema, casement windows are not traditional to that area. So.
All right, Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'll try and shed some light on this. As one who has built houses, that white surround is probably a 1x4, which means it's probably 3/4 of an inch deep. It resides on the single wall, which is underneath the siding. So the siding is cut short and butts up against that surround. If our goal is to try to accomplish this 2.5 inches of shadow, even if you added onto that, you're going to slab a 2x4 on its side or something larger around 3 sides of that. That's what you'd be looking at. The other option is, if you've already asked the gentleman to remove the siding, the windows that he's used are mounted on the wall underneath the siding, that the wall to which the siding is applied. Anybody who's seen an upgrade on windows knows that those windows can be removed and reused elsewhere. So consider all those options. You could actually remove those, use them on another project, and install the correct window on the single wall underneath the siding, which is to be reapplied. I just wanted to give you that information for your decision. Thanks.
Yes, I'll say, wishing that we were flip-flopping on, I'm wishing that we had said that we were not requiring the siding to be changed and just asking for the windows to be swapped out, because I think, but that's my personal opinion. Because I agree, I think it would look better if they had totally different windows. I also think we didn't open the record, but it would probably be good for us to hear from the actual applicant on his thoughts on actually adding these trim and this. We're not builders, and it surprises me that I feel like we're sitting here trying to architect how to build a house and put lipstick on a pig and make a window, and instead of just saying swap out the windows for the right windows that are supposed to be in there. So like I said, I was kind of hoping that the commission was going to go where we swap out the windows and left the siding alone, but anybody have an opinion on the windows? I do think they should have been swapped. I do think that I'm just not sure that this makeshift of adding trim and adding this and that. I agree with Commissioner O'Donnell. If you're really truly trying to get shadow, you'd have to add like 2x4s almost to those. And I think that would look horrible. I mean, I can't imagine anybody wanting to buy a house that had 2x4s around their windows. So I mean, I feel like we're trying to build a house with matchsticks when it should have been done a different way. I'm kind of shocked that you all were willing to tell this applicant to replace all the siding on all of those houses, and you're waffling on swapping out windows. So are you, I'm just kind of baffled by this. So Commissioner Smith.
I think we should swap out the windows. I think if there was some sort of, if we had some sort of mock-up to kind of explain to us what we're talking about here, that might help. But we're looking at pictures that don't equate. And yeah, until we actually see it on the buildings, that we don't really know what it's going to look like. But I do know in general that when I read those specifics about rhythm and balance, these windows don't do it on those buildings.
I agree with you. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, since you as mayor asked for a firm opinion, I think we should swap out the windows. I think that's the best. And financially, at least the windows are reusable that he removes. It's not the burden that other things we've imposed are. So I say swap out the windows. Thanks.
So that's a majority that are saying swap the windows. Commissioner McGriff.
I'll take Skylights for 200.
Okay. Skylights. do you have comments on the skylights?
Well, I'm struggling with the issue of being conspicuous or inconspicuous. They are not inconspicuous. That's kind of where I fall out after looking at the slide. They're not inconspicuous. They're quite visible. I don't have any objection to skylights, but I think the standard says that they should be inconspicuous. And when I looked up the word, it was very clear, not visible.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
I'll just simply agree with Commissioner McGriff. They are not inconspicuous. My earlier drive-by before our previous meeting, they are not inconspicuous. Thanks.
So Ms. Reed, can you comment on the criteria for the design? Was it design guidelines for new construction regarding skylights? This one was one that was kind of, I felt even in the staff report was a little confusing. In the same paragraph, you said there was a section where it clearly said that skylights facing the windows were not approved. And then the next sentence you said, however, there was some statement about skylights being placed near, and so it almost felt like our own design guidelines had conflicting guidelines. So can you explain, I'm sure you probably know which paragraph I'm talking about. Can you explain that?
Sure. I think the confusion lies a little bit in the fact that the Historic Review Board originally placed a condition that said skylights are not allowed in visible locations. That was a condition of approval. It's not a design guideline, using the design guideline language. But now that we are reviewing the skylights that have been installed against the design guidelines, we're not reviewing them as to whether they're visible, because we don't necessarily have to rely on the old conditions of approval. We're relying on the design guidelines, which say install skylights on inconspicuous roof slopes. The board's discussion about these skylights are that they are not placed on the street facing roof slopes. So for example, house number 1 has a side gable roof with the front of the roof facing the street. There's no skylight on that roof. If there were, that would I think that would definitely violate the design guideline. So the board, talked about the fact that the roof slopes that are where the skylights are located are side facing, they're not facing the street. So even though you can see them, they are not, the board didn't find that they violated that design guideline.
Okay, so the Historic Review Board did not have any issues with the skylights. The appellant had issues with the skylights. Okay,
that's correct.
Commissioner McGriff. Ms. Richter, do you have clarification?
My question is for Ms. Richter.
Ms. Richter, do you need to make a clarification before we continue?
Go ahead. I'll merge it in.
Commissioner McGriff.
Yes, it's about statement just made. The 2007 conditions, the way that I just heard that is like, oh, they don't matter. I'm confused. When it was approved, there were conditions of approval to me that are just as valid as everything else that we are considering. And I went back and reread that staff report because I wanted to make sure that I understood where the progression of the board was going. So I guess I'm puzzled as to why we would say that they are not significant when I think they are.
Okay. I think that the answer to your question, Commissioner McGriff, is that the code allows for modification of conditions. And if a person asks for modification of conditions, we review that modification request against the code, not against those previous conditions. So that is what this applicant has requested. And so that is what we have been asked to do. We are not evaluating whether or not those conditions in 2017 were satisfied. That is the job of enforcement. So the code allows for modification, and it doesn't specify whether or not that request comes before or after construction occurs. And that's the comment I think that Ms. Turway made a little bit earlier. The point I wanted to make with respect to Skylights is that the guideline itself talks about inconspicuous roof slopes. It doesn't say inconspicuous skylights, and maybe those mean the same thing, but maybe they don't. And the other thing I think that has been important was relevant to the Historic Review Board when they reviewed this question was that the HRB has approved skylights on roof slopes that do not face the street for other structures in Kenema. And so I understand we've had, precedent may not control in this case. The commission is completely free to not let precedent be relevant. But if it is going to be relevant, it ought to be either relevant throughout, or we ought to be clear about why we're embracing precedent with respect to siding, for example, and requiring smooth siding because we've never approved textured siding, but then rejecting it somewhere else without some kind of clear explanation for why we're doing that. And I think there's lots of design and landscaping and siting reasons to treat different projects differently, but I think it would be helpful for staff in writing the findings if we could be clear about that.
Okay. That makes sense to me. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Well, a couple of things. We talked about how precedence does not apply, and that's what we talked about last meeting. I actually agree with the attorney. I mean, a flat roof you could put a skylight that would be invisible from the road anywhere, but the criteria is what it is. It's whatever the term is we're now using, and that skylight is very visible as you come up the hill, and if that roof were flat, you never see it. So whether you talk about the slope of the roof or the position of the roof relative to the road, I feel that skylight's in violation of the criteria. Thanks.
Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, regardless of the wording, if we're talking about the roof slope being inconspicuous and you're driving perpendicular to a building, that's just the same as having basically those skylights on the front roof slope. So it's they're not inconspicuous. The roof slope's not inconspicuous unless it's on the back of the house.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we have general consensus from 3 of the commissioners to remove the skylights. And I'm looking at the exhibit. We are not talking about the skylight on house number 1. The HRB's called out specific skylights on specific. Well, I guess that's the question. Are we talking about all skylights? I just want to make sure we're really clear. I believe we're only talking about skylights on house number 2 and maybe house number 4 and 5. Is that correct?
I was addressing the HRB's statement.
Commissioner Smith?
So one of the questions I have, I guess, is I think referring to Skylight 1, which I think that the reason that there wasn't an issue with it is, and in other circumstances, it's kind of listed as the expectation that landscaping will disguise these at some point, or at least some of them. And I guess my worry is there's no landscaping there now. So how do we know that? How do we know that the landscaping will be put in and that it'll, disguise those things? We don't.
I agree with you, Commissioner Smith. Again, we don't. Mayor Lyle Smith, can we have staff show those pictures again, please?
Sure, Ms. Reed.
Okay, so the first picture there shows the house, the skylight on house number 2. You can see the retaining wall that we talked about earlier. Above that retaining wall is the landscaping that's proposed, including a few trees. And so our anticipation is that those trees, because the grade change going up, that those will provide some visual screening. And the other part of the HRB discussion is that house is set back very far from the right-of-way, making that roof slope inconspicuous itself. The other 2 photos are house number 4, skylights, and then the next slide, if I can change it here, is house number 5. So house number 5 is, depending on where you stand, you may or may not be able to see the skylights. And then on the side that's kind of facing the vegetated area, you can only see it, kind of in the wintertime when there are no leaves on those trees.
Commissioner Smith, did you have something?
Yeah, we'll go back to the house number 2. Even without that red circle, if you took that red circle off, you pretty much have a bullseye right to that. So unless we know that there's the trees covering that is not inconspicuous at all. It's a big white square in the center of the roof that's easily visible from the street. So
I will say though, it does look like there's something around that skylight that maybe that is still under construction, because normally when they're finished, like the other picture of house number 4, it's dark shingles that go all the way up. That picture makes me look like it's mid-construction or mid putting that skylight on there with the extra, you can't tell it so far away, like what's coming off of that skylight. I mean, I can't imagine that I think that white, but what my pointing is, I think that is not normal when your eye goes.
Right.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Is the criteria not conspicuous or not conspicuous? The criteria is not conspicuous because of the effects of landscaping. They're conspicuous. And that's the criteria I believe we're supposed to apply.
So according just to the amended report, or the supplemental report says, according to the design guidelines, skylights are to be located on inconspicuous roof slopes.
So then it doesn't matter if there's white around that window or not. It's the question is it on an inconspicuous roof slope? And that roof slope is not inconspicuous. It faces the street. So the white thing around it doesn't matter, even if it is construction. It's saying it has nothing to do with the actual skylight itself. It's whether or not it's on an inconspicuous slope, and all of these are not. I mean, all of these are on a slope of a roof that is easily visible from the street.
There it is.
period. Has nothing to do with the skylights.
Okay, Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, I have another question for staff. So I'm looking on the memorandum dated, wait, let me find the date. Well, I guess there's no date on it. It was the memorandum received, April 27th. So and I apologize, there's no page numbers on here. So it's the item on number 3 regarding skylights. There's a statement in here that said, the skylights have been installed on a number of homes that are not in the same locations as depicted on the approved plans. So where were they supposed to be located? I had a big question mark. I did not understand that. So without getting into that, they were supposed to be someplace else is what that statement is saying.
They were originally proposed, there were skylights. I don't know exactly how many. There were skylights on maybe all 6 of the original proposed 6 homes, right? And the HRB said skylights are okay as long as they are not visible from the right of way and they are, otherwise meeting the guideline.
Okay.
And yeah, so the locations were adjusted, and the outcome is that these are the skylights that were installed, and so we're kind of reviewing these skylights.
Okay, thank you. I'm clearer now. I'm going to erase my question mark.
All right, so it did sound like before we looked at the pictures, there was still general consensus, I believe, on removing the skylights that were visible from the right of way. They were not supposed to be installed as visible. I saw thumbs up from Commissioner Morrow. Yes, so we have general consensus on that. Ooh. So I think you have consensus on, or you have direction on all 3 of those. I would entertain some guidance from Ms. Turway or Ms. Richter or Ms. Reed of how do we make a motion on next steps, or can you propose a motion for us regarding this one particular, addressing the 3?
Before we do that, do you mind if staff just repeats so we make sure that we hear you correctly as far as it relates to everything, and we'll go back and include the citing in that motion as well, or in that summary as well? All right.
Well, before you do that, then if you're going to include the citing, I've mentioned a couple of times I would love for us to revisit the decision on the citing because I think we made an error based on our review criteria. Is there anybody else who would reconsider that or would like to reconsider, or are we staying the same? I see Commissioner Smith saying no. Mr. O'Donnell saying no. Commissioner Morrow, I think you said yes earlier. Commissioner McGriff?
I made the original motion. I am not sure if it's really a balance between the windows or the siding. I have a long history with that particular issue with HRB, and I will say that I have a concern about leaving it. I'm concerned about the precedent when the HRB has not, and that precedent about the siding is important to me. It's important to me because smooth siding is typical in the districts, I say plural. There are different grades of that type of siding. That to me is one of the most extreme ones. I had the same quandary when I was looking at revising the siding for my accessory structure. And I brought in samples for the board to see, just to make sure that I had it right. So again, I'm just using my own experience. I have concerns about the windows. I don't disagree fundamentally with what Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Smith talked about. I'm looking at it from degrees. I am uncertain as to whether I want to revisit that discussion right at the moment. I'd like to sort of.
Hold that one for a second.
I think the siding could be reused elsewhere if it's taken off carefully. I do think that windows are critical. I'm just undecided at the moment.
All right, so Mr. Ray, why don't we come to a conclusion, make sure we're all on the same page on the 3 of where we're generally at. And then I think we should take a break and walk away for 5 or 10 minutes. We've been doing this for a while, and then come back and we'll have a motion or decision on the siding piece. So how does that sound? So Ms. Turner, you want to recap the 3, the windows, the skylights, and the wall, retaining wall?
Replacement of all windows as identified in the design guidelines. Retention of the 5-foot retaining wall, provided that it has the additional texture, and we'll find some language to make sure that we get that texture right and sync it with the other wall as best we can. But no other further retaining walls, retention of the 5-foot one. And then, removal of skylights that are visible from the street.
I actually would like to ask some clarifying questions, if I may, to understand what we mean by what is meant by visible skylights, and what kind of windows you would like to use as replacement windows, if there is any specific type of window or style of window there.
I will not say I'm supporting it, but I will say that the windows that are traditional in Kenema are 1/1s. They are not casements. Again, we're talking about an era where I don't believe casements really would have existed at that particular time. So I think that's what maybe Commissioner O'Donnell, am I correct, Commissioner O'Donnell? You're talking about a traditional style window?
I am. I'm talking about the very windows that are defined under the historic district, whatever that may be.
It's generally 1/1s with some sort of divided light. Actually, the simpler the better, is my opinion. If you take out the divided lights, if you put divided lights in, it's complicated. You do simple 1/1s, it's very basic.
And by that, you mean single hung or double hung windows?
Aren't the windows in the district traditional 1/1 double hung?
I think
with a thing in the middle.
I think the hard part is that these are simulated divided light 1/1, right? They have the band making them 1/1 in appearance. So if
sort of,
right. I just want to make sure, as we draft our language for the conditions, when we come back, that we're looking for single hung or double hung windows with that depth and shadow line as replacement windows. And then also, are we talking about the replacement of the windows on the street facing facades, or every single window in every single house?
Again, what does the HRB define? I mean, we're asking questions that I believe are already defined.
So I think just to help Kelly out here, the HRB limited the windows to certain homes along certain frontages. There was a map with the red line onto which windows would be changed. So if that's what we're limiting that to, then that's the clarification that we need.
I think she's also asking for clarification on the style of the windows, it sounds like. But you bring up a good point. The HRB was saying only it's, I think, road facing windows, specific windows needed to be replaced. Whereas what Ms. Turway said was that all windows needed to be replaced. So I feel like there's a discrepancy there.
I think in my mind, you've opened up unintentionally opened up another can of worms. Have we as a jurisdiction allowed, I don't understand the concept of a house or a building having windows only on one face and then the other ones are something completely different. I don't think in new construction we have done that where it's one place here and there's something else over here. The windows have been fairly consistent. I mean, again, as a professional in this field, all of the facades are equally important. I'm not saying this is what other people feel. This is what I believe. They're not indistinguishable from one or the other, whether you can see it from the street or not. Again, this is not a historic structure. This is new construction. And I would think, I don't know I'm trying to, in my mind, understand how that would look, where you'd have one look in one place and then something else going on over here. Again, you've now raised more doubt in my mind.
Well, if I may, I think the HRB was saying the minimum is that you need to replace these windows because they're the ones that are seen from the. However, as a builder or developer, the developer can choose whether or not the windows on the houses are different on one side of the street, on one side of the house or another. I think this is how I'm interpreting, was that HRB was establishing a minimum, and then the developer gets to decide if you want to have different style windows on different sides of the houses.
I just vehemently disagree with you. When it goes to HRB, they're not looking at just the front facades, they're looking at the entire new construction. The person that's the applicant doesn't get to make that decision. They propose something and then the board makes their decision. So that's where I think, in terms of how it's reviewed, I'm relying on my experience and expertise in having done this for 25 to 30 years. So that's not their decision. That is the decision of the board. If the board says it's okay to have inconsistent windows, whether I agree with it or not, that's their decision.
Okay, so I believe the Historic Review Board, though, did say that the windows could be different on different sides of the house. Is that correct? I see head shaking, yes. So the City Commission, when we talked about windows, we gave staff direction that said all windows need to be replaced. So staff need clarification. Are we saying all, or are we agreeing with the Historic Review Board and saying change the windows, certain windows that are on certain, as a minimum, you need to change those windows? Or are we saying replace all of the windows?
I think that I can get to a point where I concur with Commissioner O'Donnell.
And what was Commissioner O'Donnell's statement? Commissioner O'Donnell, can you tell me what you said like 30 minutes ago?
I honestly feel that we continue to confound the issue, that in fact, Kenema is a National Historic District, that there are criteria that apply to it, that the HRB defined them initially, that the thing should be proper in historical appearance, regardless of the face of the building. And I would go with all windows. And I would leave it at that. I'm not trying to redefine the standard. Thanks.
So I guess, is there consensus that this means every window, or do we need a motion to that effect?
I'm going to pull back from my original that I agree with Mr. Commissioner O'Donnell, and I want to support the Historic Review Board because I feel that their decision-making process is valid, and I want to confirm to past applicants, present applicants, future applicants that they make a decision. I want to try to uphold that because I feel that that is what is right and just. I'm not going to get into what I personally feel about it, but that's where I'm going right now, unless Commissioner O'Donnell is more persuasive.
So exactly what position are you supporting, Commissioner McGriff? Which windows would you have changed? Any window visible from the street? Whether
as per the Historic Review Board recommendation.
So someone read that recommendation again, please.
Would it be easier, Kelly, with the visual?
Mm-hmm.
I just need the recommendation from the Historic Review Board.
Well, it's their decision. It's not a recommendation. It's their
okay, their decision, whatever it may be.
That's why she's fine. I don't understand that line of reasoning. We're not following that line of reasoning for anything else. They made a decision on skylights and we're reversing that. So they made a decision on the siding and we reversed that decision as well. So I have a hard time saying that we're making this windows decisions based on upholding what HRB's decision was.
All right, well, I'm going to change my mind then based on your conversation. I will hold what Commissioner O'Donnell said, and that's my final answer.
I guess I would tend to agree about the, I'm a little torn because I do know that HRB tends to require, and in our guidelines, they require things on certain sides of the house, and you can do things on the back sides of houses that are different than the front sides of houses, like how you build porches and the materials that you use. So because I know that that is what HRB or what the guidelines say, I tend to support the HRB's decision on this of the windows. So we need opinions from Commissioner Smith and Commissioner Morrow. Commissioner Morrow?
I will just say that I agree with Commissioner O'Donnell.
I do as well.
Okay. So it's all the windows will be replaced.
Okay.
Okay. Can I back up 1 second? And we talked about all those skylights visible from the right of way will be removed. I'm assuming that that means all. Can we just remove the right of way?
Well, the terminology was also conspicuous.
Okay, so I guess I just don't want to be, I think we just need to provide clarity. We know which houses they are. We have pictures of them. Can we just go through and say which ones are coming out, or if it's just?
It's houses 2, 4, and 5.
Okay.
Those were the ones in the pictures.
Yep. So 2, 4, and 5, all skylights will be removed.
Yes.
And on the window style, they have to be double hung or single hung windows. Casement windows are not going to be approved.
Okay.
I'm asking.
Oh, I thought you were providing guidance from a document.
Well, I'm reading from the design guidelines, and they call for double or single hung windows and casement or fixed if the style allows.
I believe the appellant was specific in wanting single or double hung windows, and that's what the appellant, which is what we're talking about, the request of the appellant for that particular style of window to be consistent with CONPEMA.
Okay.
All right, so it is 8:54, almost 9 o'clock. I think we need to take a 5 or 10 minute break. Commissioner McGriff, is that a hand saying 5 minutes or an agreement? 5 minutes? Is everybody good with? I think we should recess for 5 minutes. Clear your mind, think about the siding decision, and then we're going to move on. Right, we'll be in recess. We'll come back. Let's just come back at 9 o'clock. So we have, there's Miss Commissioner McGriff. All right, so it looks like we have everybody, so I'm going to call the regular meeting back to order. It's 9 o'clock. And the last request that I had was to reconsider our decision based on the design criteria by which we the design criteria by which we were supposed to make that decision. And Commissioner O'Donnell.
So I have a point of order. We made this decision at the previous meeting. We reaffirmed that we were not reopening this discussion at this meeting. Why are we doing it? Who is allowed to who is deciding to reopen the discussion?
Ms. Richter, do you want
to? The decision you made at the last meeting was a tentative decision with respect to one of the appeals. That is all. So the application is still before you. It isn't final. And so I believe that all of the appeal issues are still on the table with a tentative decision to require removal and replacement of the siding. It is the commission's decision whether or not they want to stay with that tentative decision or change it.
So under Robert's Rules of Order, is it not only those who have voted in the affirmative that can decide to ask to reopen something?
Yes, but I believe that the decision has not been, the decision is not final. So
I'll craft that as you will. That's my point.
I guess the other thing I would say is we only agreed not to open the record for additional public comment or testimony. That was the earlier decision. Commissioner Smith.
Is there a belief that we somehow did not follow the guidelines in making that decision? Because the way I read them, one of the main principles is about texture, and the texture was the issue, and the reason that and it was basically stated that, oh well, texture is not an issue because you can't tell the texture from the street. That's not the guideline. The guideline is that it's compatible with the historic siding and enclosure materials in size, profile, orientation, texture, and color. And it's not.
So I am reading from the exhibit 4, which was the list of design changes. And in that table, it gives the relevant design guideline. And for that row, it says the historic design guidelines do not specifically prohibit textured fiber cement siding. Rather, they call for the appearance of wood siding.
That is not the appearance of wood siding that is traditionally seen in the district.
So the original question on the table was whether or not we would reconsider the decision. Commissioner McGriff, I think we had a 2 and a 2 of reconsidering. It sounds like we're reconsidering whether or not you provided direction or not on whether you wanted to. So we're having the discussion.
I made my decision last week and I'm going to stand by that. I do not want to reconsider the decision. I put that to bed and I want to focus on what we have at hand, which is the other items. So thank you.
Okay. Ms. Turway, next steps for this. Do you need a motion for us? I believe that you're going to have to come back with findings. I'm trying to open the staff report really quickly. can we get some guidance on what the motion should be? Because I feel like in one case we're agreeing with the appellant and the other we're making changes, or so can I get some help with the motion? The commission get help with the motion of what we should do at this point?
Sure. Carrie, do you want to summarize it or would you like me to?
I can do it, I think. So I believe what the motion that you're going to make is to modify the Historic Review Board's approval of this modification application, requiring that the retaining wall behind House 1 be faced with a finish that appears similar to stone quarried from the area. And we'll come back with some language that reflects that. Requirement that all the windows be replaced with double or single hung wood or aluminum clad windows that give the appearance of wood, with trim that provides shadow lines, and removal of the skylights on houses 2, 4, and 5. And that will be a tentative decision, and we will return on June 7th with findings that reflect that. And I believe that would be the motion.
I think it's June 2nd.
Excuse me, June 2nd. Thank you.
Do I have anyone to make a motion in agreement with what Ms. Richter just said?
I'll make that motion as stated by Ms. Richter.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, Ms. Riggs, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Denise McGriff,
I need a little more time.
okay. Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
and I'm back to you, Commissioner Denise McGriff.
I know that it's a simple yes or no, and probably more than anybody else on this commission, I'm sensitive to what is going on in both districts. I'm concerned. I'm going to reluctantly say yes, because I'm still distressed about some aspects of this decision, and I will talk to the public about that if they ask me. So.
Okay, Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes.
All right, so this item's going to come back to us again. More conversation, or I guess approval. All right, so we're going to move on to 8B, which is a request by staff for the continuation of Public Works Code Amendments Act number 3 to June 16th. I'm not sure if we need a presentation on this. I guess they're essentially asking for a continuance because we had already stated this was going to come back, I believe, for tonight, and clearly it's not.
So I'll move to grant a continuation of item 8B, Public Works Codes Amendment to June 16th, 2021.
Second.
Discussion, Commissioner McGriff?
Yes, Mr. Away, could you remind me of which ones those are again? I had my notes and I've tucked them away elsewhere, and so I apologize.
The bulk of the third package is related to geologic hazards, which we had the work session next week, thus the continuance here.
It was originally scheduled and I believe had to get bumped because of these appeal hearings, which have a time sensitivity to them. So that's why they had to get bumped.
Is that the only thing?
It looks like it is. Staff report. I see yes from Mr. Way.
It is.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion, Commissioner McGriff? Okay, Ms. Riggs, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Commissioner McGriff,
No.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Morrow,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, we're on to general business. Item number 9A. We've tried to have this one like 3 times now. So Ms. Turway, I think up and we probably do have public comment on this. So I'm sure Mr. Atkinson is super happy we're finally getting to this one. Ms. Turway.
All right. Can you guys see a PowerPoint there?
Yes, we do.
All right. Oops. Sorry, minor issues. Okay, still working for you?
Yes.
All right, thank you. The dual screen. So this evening, we're gonna present to you some minor amendments to the guidelines for traffic impact analyses. So what are the guidelines? The guidelines are a summary that tells us what needs to be in a technical engineering study. So what data needs to be included in applications themselves when people do traffic studies. We're not looking at what the results of the data say, just simply what is the data? What needs to be in this bundle of data? So things like how do we know which intersections to analyze? Do we look at safety? Do we look at how many trips new projects put on our system and so forth? And so the analysis of determining what the results of that data says happens through a totally separate process. That's where we have criteria in our code and we work through a public process to say, you know, how reliable is this data and what do the results of this data say as far as the appropriateness of development. So tonight, the traffic impact analysis just tells us what really needs to be in the study, and so we are proposing to update that. Some of the example information that goes in traffic impact analysis include looking at what is the system like today? How safe is it today? What other how much traffic is there in the world? How much other development has already been approved but has not been constructed? What are the impacts of the development, such as how much traffic will this specific development put on our streets? What will the site distance be like? What will that do to intersections? And then we look at the full build out. So putting those 2 things together, and what does that mean for like queue length? Do we need a new turn lane? Will that make an intersection have too much traffic? So the traffic impact analysis just says, what are those numbers? And again, we'll go through that later process with the code to figure out what those numbers actually mean and the results and any mitigation that's needed. Here's some example of information in traffic studies. There's some included in your packet just to get a sample of the types of data that we look at. So we look at crash history. This is a crash history report. We look at how many, we look at the turning movements at intersections and how congested those are. So a couple of sample reports from that. We also look at how many cars go from one place to another. So where do we go? What's the distribution of traffic, both adjacent to the development and throughout the city too. So again, I just want to reiterate that these guidelines are not development criteria. They're just saying what data needs to be in the study. And we take this data and go through that land use process again to look at how reliable is it? Did they miss something? And then what does this mean? Do they need to do street improvements or does it just not meet our acceptable level of congestion? Through that land use process, which is really where that opportunity for the public to weigh in is identified. But what we're here for today is to really talk about these minor tweaks that we're proposing and why. So we last updated our guidelines for traffic impact analyses in 2005. And since then, you know that we have been busy doing work. We have done more code amendments than I could count. And so we have some references in here that are old. We've also adopted a new transportation system plan and then adopted our alternate mobility targets as well. Neither of those are actually reflected in the guidelines. So this is really a more administrative cleanup to make sure that we're pointing to the right things. So most of the changes are summarized on the screen. We're updating code references. We're updating TSP goals because now we have a new TSP. We're acknowledging our new mobility standards. We added a reference to multimodal transportation. We did add exemptions, so we're explicitly clear that ADUs and lot line adjustments do not need to do a traffic study. And then one of the things that we added that's not a reference was that we added a qualification that engineers need to be certified in Oregon, both for the transportation engineer creating the study, and then the city hires a transportation engineer, has a consultant right now, that reviews the study to make sure the study is correct. So we have two qualified engineers looking at it to make sure it's correct. And then we added some requirements to make sure that they show their driveway width, spacing, and side obstructions. And we decided to increase the crash history from 3 to 4 years. So that's a majority of the amendments and really the bulk of them as well. That's all I have for you tonight, and I'm here to answer any questions. We do have public testimony from Mr. Atkinson as well.
All right. Why don't we hear from our public, our citizen comments? Mr. Atkinson, can you state your name and city of residence for the record, and then you'll have 3 minutes for your citizen comments. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me? I think I'm unmuted.
I heard you that time.
Okay.
Can you just speak up real loud?
My name is Ray Atkinson, and I live in Oregon City's Gaffney Lane neighborhood. While I serve on the Transportation Advisory Committee, I am speaking as an Oregon City resident. I support the resolution because the proposed update would bring the guidelines in line with current codes, standards, and policies. The key word for me in the last sentence is current. The updated guidelines work for current mobility standards, but I have been thinking about innovative mobility standards. I understand through emailing and talking with Ms. Laura Turway that my following ideas are not within the scope of the current guidelines update process, or they need to wait until future corridor plans or the transportation system plan is updated. I reviewed the new commission goals. I want you to think about innovative mobility standards when implementing goal 1.7, which is prioritize projects in the transportation master plan to maximize safety and connectivity. I believe the existing mobility standards will not allow you to effectively accomplish goal 1.7 because these mobility standards do not include multimodal level of service or level of traffic stress. Only level of service is shown on page 653 in your packet. Ms. Dana Webb confirmed when we talked that Oregon City only uses level of service. I'm concerned by this because level of service does not evaluate bicycle and pedestrian safety and connectivity. Oregon City needs to use multimodal level of service or level of traffic stress. I heard Mayor Lyle Smith share near the end of your work session last week that she is aware of the regional mobility policy update and how this update will impact Oregon City starting in 2023. As the draft performance measures show, let me make sure that's showing on Zoom. Cool, thank you. I had one screen going back and forth, thanks. So where am I? As the draft performance measures show, Metro and ODOT are deciding whether to include multimodal level of service or level of traffic stress in the update. I want you to advocate for level of traffic stress because it directly measures safety and is the only measure that evaluates time efficiency. This decision will impact which performance measure will be used for state, regional, local, and neighborhood transportation plans. I look forward to continuing to work with you to improve the guidelines and implement the commission goals. The performance measures are technical, so I'm open to answering questions if you have any. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Atkinson. If I'm interpreting his comments correctly, I think he's advocating for these types of measurements within the transportation impact analysis, and what staff responded with was that what he was asking for was more appropriate in the transportation system plan or other transportation plans, Mr. Way?
Yes, in the code. So we need to change the code to measure a different way of congestion or mobility, such as level of traffic stress, but we don't do that now. So we would need a different approach for that, but good comments as we look forward in however many years when we update our transportation system plan or when we look at our code amendments for how we look at mobility and congestion.
Commissioner McGriff?
So I agree with Mr. Atkinson. If not now, when? I don't think that we have the time to wait to put this into our criteria. And one of my big concerns is that I'm not a traffic engineer. And when I looked at both sets of plans, and we talked about this before, is my concern has to do with Oregon City average citizen who is in a neighborhood association or in a CPO or in one of the community planning organizations. They are trying to read the traffic report based on this. What are we doing to clarify these so you don't have to be, for a better lack of a term, a rocket scientist to understand this? And this is one of the biggest concerns that neighborhood associations have. They feel like they're at a disadvantage because this is all set up so that they can't understand it or read it. And in order to read a traffic study to help them understand how the traffic is impacting their neighborhood, the issues that they continually bring up are not addressed in here. And I have never believed that LOS is the only way that you can evaluate something. So why can't we put these in here? Is there an overriding hurry that we have to update these? Without that, and once I saw that metro information, I was like, why are we not doing that? Traffic stress to me is a critical indicator of what's going on in our city and what's going on in our neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's a great question. A couple different things. One is that the way that we sent this to you was not a legislative file, and so we can't change our code at all. We can only change these guidelines that say what type of data needs to be in there for the consideration against the code standards. If we want to change the code standards to include standards regarding level of stress and other items, that is a fine idea. You just can't do it now because we're not amending our code. I think there's some other logistical challenges, like specifically the level of stress. You would want to look at that at the TSP or the corridor level to identify locations where you want bike lanes or buffered bike lanes or things like that, where it's uncomfortable for people to go. When we get down to this level at development review, you can't do selective bike lanes. You need to make sure that it syncs up with our TSP, which identifies where the bike lanes are, because they all have to connect. And so this is too far along the development review process to identify large systematic changes like that. But at those TSP or corridor studies would be the perfect place to start to look at that. And those are legislative, and you kind of have more authority there anyway.
So tell me what you can do to right now, other than adopting this as is without those considerations. Again, we're trying to make our documents more user-friendly, make them you know, not only for traffic engineers. I don't want to be a traffic engineer. And you pretty much have to be one to understand these, except for people like Ray. That's what you do for your living. So I guess I'm very.
The commission had identified some changes back in December, and so we made them back in January about making this document more reader friendly. So we simplified the TSP goals so they understood what the purpose and intent of the traffic review study is for the city. For general citizen participation in transportation reviews, I could see that it's challenging for citizens to say, that's a V over C 0.98 or 0.99, not 0.90. Like, that's going to be a challenging thing, but we have seen a lot of value for people saying, hey, you haven't looked at the sight distance, or I've experienced this problem. This turn lane seems congested. Can you look at it? These kinds of things are very helpful. So there's certainly a place for the public to have a look at these and express their concerns about traffic, and they'll have to get responded to through the development review process. Whether our level of congestion that we accept is different than what people may feel is acceptable is sort of a slightly different topic, but at least we'll have to address their concerns, and I'd say that they have certainly influenced or made us go back and double check things as a part of this review process.
Okay. Is there a schedule for when our TSP will be updated next?
John can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's not this next biennium, but the one after that. We're coming up soon on it. It's already been, that's the problem why we needed to update this, is because we're almost on a new TSP, a second new TSP. But
Mr.
is that
Lewis?
right, John?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting to hear Laura talk about, we just adopted a new TSP and it's got a date of 2013 on it. So, you know, I think we've been, we weren't on track with a 10-year update with the last one. It took longer than that to get there. And, you know, the whole region was doing TSP updates. So cities our size were getting grants from Metro and the state to update our TSP. We did do kind of a minor update, which was take a second look at the project list, clean up those projects that were on there. And then we, updated the system development charges at that time as well too. So project list is, I feel a lot better about, but things like what we're talking about here with that Mr. Atkinson's brought up is a good one. I guess the other thing that would make sense, I hear folks, why adopt this now, when there's other opportunities later? It's this is trying to take a pretty big step at helping make sure that the development community meets the latest and the greatest of what we have. So it does raise the bar for the development community to have to deal with these transportation study reports. I think the other things was with regard to some of the things, other ways of measuring congestion, for instance, or what's an appropriate level of congestion, safety. Some of the big problems associated with that is just, is there an adopted regional standard? How reasonable is it for a small developer to try to work his way through that on his own? We struggled, if you remember, a lot with the alternate mobility studies of Beaver Creek in 2013. That was like ground setting for the state, right? And to do that, and now they're looking at that as an example. I hear about Oregon City all the time, and they're with regard to that, and the work that's happening right now at Metro and the state, I think is moving in the right direction. But I'd rather, I don't want to be on the bleeding edge of that, because we don't have adopted standards for that yet. There's a lot of talk about it. I think they're going to get to a better place, but they don't have it yet.
Well, I would just add, remember on the 213 corridor, the alternative mobility standards, the trade-off was additional congestion for a longer period of time for increased safety. So I think this is a larger regional discussion, local discussion, state discussion that has to happen to determine, especially in the land use realm, what is that standard? What is that clear and objective standard that's going to be met? And, I agree that there's does LOS level of service and V over C still work? Obviously, that we're moving into a new era of how do we look at congestion and safety for all users. I'm just not. I appreciate it. I think it's a great conversation. I think that's where we're going to move, because at the end of the day, we can't afford to build our way out. But I think that the guidelines are needed now, understanding that there are going to be more discussions moving forward on how do we measure impacts on our transportation system for all users.
All right, thank you, Mr. Conkle. So this has been a good discussion. Ms. Turway's presented, she's correct. We went through this in detail, I think, back in December or January, and it's just taken a long time. It's gotten punted multiple times on agendas. So it's hard to recall all that detailed redlining text that we reviewed so long ago, like 6 months ago. If there are no further questions, is there a motion on this resolution? You guys are running out of steam, I can see. No motion.
We'll say no, I'm not running out of steam.
Okay, you can make a motion to deny the resolution if we're not in agreement with moving this forward. We just need to move this item forward in some fashion, or if we have amendments, or if you all need to think about it and provide amendments back to staff.
Can I have a motion to approve, a motion to deny, a motion to continue?
Mayor, this is why I am glad I'm not running meetings anymore.
I'm like pulling it up.
I'll move to continue this.
I'm going to ask for guidance for staff of what they need to bring back. So just be prepared for that question. Is there a second to continue this item?
I'll second it. Second by O'Donnell.
Ms. Riggs?
Yes, Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell, sorry,
Aye.
and Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
So I think staff's going to need some direction on if you want something to come back different than what they presented this evening. This has been on our agenda. I believe this is the third time. So if you need something different than what they presented, please reach out to Ms. Turway and let her know so that we can make a decision on it. Item number 9B, I will speak for myself. I don't think we should be making any decisions about establishing or changing the stormwater rates to be paid within the city at this late hour. I just don't think it's a good topic. I think we're all tired. Is there general consensus? I guess I would consider a motion to continue or table. I'm not sure what the motion would be. Would suspend the rules and move agenda item 9B to a future meeting. Is that a correct motion or somewhat quite correct, Ms. Richter? Yes. Commissioner O'Donnell?
I would agree with that. It's a complex subject. You start looking at the mathematical impact of the American Rescue Plan, about the impact in real dollars on our community at the late hour. I can tell we're fatigued. I'm fine with moving it to a future date.
Is that the motion?
Sure. Yeah, that's my motion.
Second.
Second.
All right, Ms. Riggs, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Denise McGriff,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Marl,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Mayor Rachel Al Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Ms. Riggs. Item number 9C. I guess my only comment on this one is, and I apologize to Kendall for not reaching out to you before today. It's been a busy week. I think all the commissioners are pretty tired. We've had budget meetings and a full plate. The policy that's attached in the with the agenda packet, the header reads like it's the 2001 or yes, 2001 policy. And so I didn't feel like this item presented a new policy for us to review. Did I miss it? Am I misinterpreting?
Well, what happened with this naming policy is when I reviewed the policy, I realized that the policy had never been approved by the city commission. And so it's the same policy we've been using since 2001. And so I just wanted to bring it to the city commission to have them officially approve the policy. So nothing has changed, but I just wanted to bring it to the attention of the city commission.
Okay, that makes more sense. That helps provide clarity then, because I was totally confused. Does the city commission, do you have any questions given that information of Kendall, or do you want to ask, or do we want to move this to another agenda item, or can we approve this? Looking for direction. Commissioner McGriff.
Now, I don't have any problem dealing with this. I guess my question is that we don't have any way of knowing back in 2001, did we have, other than PRAC, did we have any community input? And I guess I'm okay with it if I know that we've had that we've had an opportunity to reach out, particularly, let's say, to our neighborhood association to say, you guys, we've been using this policy. We never adopted it. What do you think? Are you still okay with this? I guess that's my question.
So part of the process is to have some collaboration with the neighborhood associations to make them involved in this process. Now, there has been community engagement incorporated in the process and outreach in regards to going through the naming process. And that's actually highlighted in the policy as one of the procedures to reach out and engage with the community and get their input. But in regards to us actually taking this policy back out to the neighborhood associations and getting some additional input on the policy, I have not done that, but I did bring it back to PRAC and ask them if they wanted to make any adjustments or edits to the policy since I was bringing it to the city commission to have them approve it.
Thank you. I don't have any problem with what you said in terms of, I'm just trying to find that, I thought I'd highlighted that specific section that you were talking about, that the community would be involved. Could you just point that out again? I've got it here in front of me, so I'm looking at it.
So it should be on page 1030. There should be a section under the asterisk section that states community involvement. Let me pull that up.
I see something that says standing committee through a specific process. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, well, we no longer have a staff liaison to the neighborhood associations, unfortunately. I wish we did. Maybe you could take under advisement maybe having a member of the CIC and maybe one member of the community at large who may be interested in this particular topic. Just having, we have 2 liaisons at CIC now, rather than just one, but you've got 2 members of PRAC, you, and that maybe that staff liaison position could be another individual community member of some sort. That would be my only suggestion. Otherwise, I support this then.
Are there any other comments? I guess on that conversation, I'll say the only other consideration for the commission that I would consider throwing out there would be to run this policy by the CIC and see if they had any feedback from the neighborhoods. But I'm also, if the rest of the commission is okay with approving this resolution with Commissioner McGriff's edit.
I'll make a motion if everybody else is okay with that.
If I could just say, I mean, the PRAC is made up of citizens. Could it be a CIC member? I mean, the PRAC is essentially citizens.
I understand, but they're PRAC. I'm talking about somebody that may be unaffiliated.
It also does specify that the standing committee shall include the director of the Parks and Recreation the Parks and Recreation, 2 members of PRAC, and the staff liaison of the neighborhood association or the CIC. So they are listed in here, but I don't know if that's specifically the staff liaison to the CIC or the CIC.
Couldn't we just add another CIC member since we do have a staff liaison? We don't have a staff liaison to the neighborhood associations. That's what I'm reading that to mean.
All right, it sounds like this item needs some review. I don't think we're going to get there tonight. Folks are tired. Take some time to review this policy. Would you like Kendall to run this by CIC, or would you like to just review it again and get back to him?
I can review it and make the recommended edit and bring it back for another review.
I would just move that we allow the edit and approve it and let him edit it as we've recommended and move on. I don't see any need to bring this back again.
Is staff clear on what the edit would be?
Yes.
I'll second that.
All right. So the motion has been made to approve resolution number 21-26 with the modification that Mr. Kendall Reed has written down. I don't know whether that word.
Add another CIC person.
To add a CIC member. Sorry.
A second one.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith.
Aye.
Commissioner Adam Morrow.
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Mayor Rachel L. Smith.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right. Thank you all for hanging in there and getting there. We're at communications. Mr. City Manager, do you have any communications for us tonight?
No, not tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioners, do you have anything for the good of the order?
I just wanted Mr. Conkle to talk about the expectation for the meeting that we're going to have on the 24th with our partners, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde.
So we've scheduled that special meeting, special work session on Monday, the 24th. Representatives from Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde will be providing a presentation on their vision master plan for the Blue Heron property. So there'll be an opportunity to see their proposal, as well as engage in questions and discussion about their development proposal that they've put forward.
All right. And with that, I do not believe I.
We'll be Zooming that meeting, I presume correctly.
Correct. Yes. Just like it's a commission work session, there are 2 other items after that as well. So, yep.
I would just like to remind my fellow commissioners that with the exception of Commissioner Morrow, we received a gift from the Grand Ron. And I would like to suggest that you have that on when we meet with them. That would be showing a sign of respect to them. You understand what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for that, Commissioner McGriff. And I do not have any communications for this evening. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.